Hello, friends, and welcome back to Dare Me to Prosper. My name is Avery, and I am your host. I feel like today's episode is actually really kind of a good representation of what this podcast is as a whole. We're talking about the messy middle, the healing that happens when you are working on yourself and when you are trying to overcome trauma and process emotions and all of that. When you're not who you were, but you're not yet who you are becoming. You are in the messy middle. Because spiritual and emotional healing is really what this podcast is all about. And the reason it's so important, and the thing that people don't realize, because I think a lot of people think, why? What's the point? Especially if you're not somebody whose trauma really haunts you, or you tend not to reflect a lot on the past or on the present, which is likely not you if you're here. But healing your kind of emotional landscape is not just about feeling better in your emotions. It's not just about being happier. It's not just about feeling more peace and being able to move past, your past and things like that. But also, and I've been saying this a lot, I feel like on TikTok lately, but it's also about your entire life trajectory. Because when you do your emotional healing, not only are you working on yourself, but you're also clearing the energetic blocks that have been holding you back without even realizing it. Unresolved emotions create patterns in your mind, in your body, in your energy that actually keep you stuck. For example, you can be stuck in a scarcity mindset. You can be stuck in tension and just a really negative nervous system state. You can be stuck in unfulfilling relationships. When you release those old wounds, when you process that trauma and those emotions, your energy, your frequency naturally shifts. And when that happens, you essentially make space for abundance, connection, opportunities to flow in because you're at that higher frequency. You are a match to better things, to things that are more fulfilling, more abundant, more aligned for you. And so doing all of that emotional work will suddenly put you in a place where you notice doors opening more easily. You notice that people are responding to you differently. You notice that old relationships that are more negative, they don't really fit with you anymore. They fall apart. You are attracting new relationships and people that are on that higher frequency like you are. You find that situations will align with you in ways that feel more effortless, not such an uphill battle, not so much work. Healing your inner world, doing the inner work, literally changes the frequency that you are operating from. And that means that life will respond to you in that new aligned energy. That's why when I say your life gets better when you do your emotional healing, that is why. And a lot of times people just don't grasp that. They think, oh, I need to work harder, or I need to set the boundaries, or I need to go out of my way to force these opportunities to happen. But really, it becomes effortless when you heal the emotional side of you. And that does include setting boundaries. So maybe that was a bad example, but many people don't realize how closely tied these things are. But what this episode is about, and what I really want to encourage you in, is how messy it gets in the middle, where you know maybe what you need to do, or you are aware of what you want to do, but you're not yet to the other side. You're doing the hard work in the middle, which is what many of us are going through right now. And it's hard and it's messy and it's confusing. And so you might think that you're doing everything wrong, when in reality, you're doing everything right. It just feels really, really hard. And so this hopefully will be an encouragement to you, because healing always looks really obvious and inspiring in hindsight. Like once you're through it, you're like, yeah, I'm so proud of myself. I did that work. I did this. I did that, but in the middle, it's confusing, disorganized, and it feels like nothing is changing, which that's the main thing, is you feel like nothing is changing because you're not done with the healing yet. And so you might get through part of it and be like, you know what, this is too hard. It's not working. I tried this. It's what people do with things like manifestation too. It's like, I tried that. It didn't work. The work always works if you do it long enough. If you give up too soon, the work will not work. Okay. If you follow through and stay the path and stay the trajectory and, finish out what you started doing, it will pay off. You will get there. However, what I won't sugarcoat is that it's still exhausting. It's still triggering. But when you feel like you're doing everything right and you are unsure of if you're making progress or not, that often means that you are doing it right and that you are making progress, but all the progress is kind of underneath the surface instead of in the physical, tangible world where you can see it yet. And so the quote unquote messy middle is where the old self is dismantling, but the new self isn't fully built yet. And that space is very uncomfortable, but that is where the real transformation happens. So, for example, what could this look like? I will give you examples from my own life. And I've talked about some of my past experiences on the podcast many times as examples. But just to kind of give you an image, things that I have really struggled with in my life, the big things that I've had to overcome is one, financial scarcity. Especially before the age of 12, I was in a very, tight spot within my family. My home life was very chaotic. We were very poor. There was evictions. There was just lack of general resources. I never starved or anything like that, but it was rough. Okay. And so from then, really up until this point, my life was kind of defined by this financial scarcity. It got a little bit more stable between the ages of 12 and graduating high school. But then as soon as I was in college and I was really on my own again, I worked all through college, multiple jobs, to maintain my own income. And from that point all the way through my marriage that I just left, all through adulthood, scarcity and financial hardship was a big defining part of my life. And now I am very aware that that was part of my soul path. That was part of my soul mission, was to overcome this mindset. I learned so much from that financial scarcity. And was it frustrating? Yes. Was it the hardest thing I have ever done? Yes. And thankfully, all my kids and my family, everybody is healthy. So I've been very blessed in that area where the financial aspect of my life truly was the hardest part. But I don't say that lightly because it's a very, very hard place to be, especially once I became an adult and, our income was what supported our family and kept us, with a place to live and kept food on the table and all of that. We many, many times were close to eviction or behind on mortgage or couldn't really put food on the table without help of family, that kind of thing. It is really, really difficult. And so part of that healing was I had to overcome that scarcity mindset. And honestly, I would say I'm at the tail end of that. I know what's coming for me. I know what I'm building. And I know that is not part of my forever trajectory. I know that was a healing lesson that I had to learn. And I specifically know, and I've talked about this before, but if I look at my birth chart, it's very much the first half of my life is difficult lesson learning. The second part of my life is the other side of that, where I get to have the abundance. I get to have the better relationships. I get to have all that. But I did a lot of healing on the front end of my life. Okay. And so for me, that looked like not defining my worth by the amount in my bank account. And that is something that I have especially been working on the last 5 years or so. And I had to do a lot of internal work to move past that. And so that's something that I had to work on to get to the other side. And I'm not fully on the other side yet, but I'm certainly well on my way. Another thing, a lot of my healing actually revolved around self-worth. So my past marriage was another area, and there was similarities between my childhood and my relationship with my parents, and then my past marriage, where there was just a lot of similar themes of the way that people treated me and how I tied that to my own self-worth. Also, I am the oldest daughter in the family. And so there were a lot of times when I carried a lot of burden and I carried a lot of the responsibility, where I felt even as a child, I was responsible for getting things done. I was responsible for carrying other people's emotions. And so what this did was create this aspect of me where I felt like I was just taking on everything. And I developed these mindsets or these feelings of other people aren't there for me. Other people don't show up for me. Other people don't understand my emotions. They're not there for my emotions. That was another thing, is just like feeling, and I think this is common, feeling in childhood like you're not validated. You're not allowed to have emotions, especially like millennials. I think it's more common now for parents to be aware of their kids' emotional worlds a little bit more. And so that was another big lesson that I have been working on. And really, that one I've probably come a lot further in. But it's one, being open to receiving help from other people and not feeling like everything is on me all the time. It's always giving and never receiving, taking on other people's anger or their emotions as my own personal responsibility. That's something I really had to work on, especially in my previous marriage, where it was like, I don't need to be responsible for other people's emotions all the time. It doesn't mean I can't show up for people. It means it's not my responsibility to fix you. And also, being an empath, I don't have to take on your emotions. Anyway, so there's a lot more. Obviously, everybody has a ton of this kind of stuff, but I just want to give you some like tangible, practical examples of what healing actually looks like and what it means. So for me, that meant detaching, and I had to work on this. Like I was talking with a therapist and I was reading books and I was trying to understand, how do I mentally detach myself from you, especially in really negative relationships like my marriage was. It was like, how do I disconnect and not feel responsible for your emotions? Like I had to really, sadly, disconnect myself from my partner to be like, I'm not responsible for that. And I have to stay in my own lane. I used to tell myself, like, I can't ride your roller coaster. I cannot get on your emotional roller coaster. I have to stay on my own. And it's not fair for you to ask me to fix your roller coaster when it's broken. You know what I mean? Like I have to stay over here. I'm here for you. I show up for you. I'll talk to you about it, but I can't carry it. Okay. And so long story short, to kind of wrap that up, healing those things have put me in a higher frequency. I've stepped more into my self-worth. I've stepped out of a scarcity mindset. I no longer feel like I have to fix other people's emotions. I'm very aware of like, hey, I see your emotional response. That's what you're going through, especially if people are really angry or, I just feel completely misunderstood by other people. I'm like, okay, that's their stuff. This is my stuff. I'm not responsible for fixing your emotions. And I recognize that now. I didn't recognize that before. I didn't even see the patterns that I was doing. It took some awareness to be like, oh, I'm doing this. I'm allowing myself to get caught up in your emotions because that was my childhood pattern. Now I'm stepping back. I'm setting boundaries and I am emotionally detaching myself from your emotions. Okay. And it sounds really like wrapped up with a bow on it now, but that took me years of, just having the understanding at first, being self-aware, kind of coming online and being like, oh, that's what's happening. That took me years to do. Okay. Not a million years, a lot of it I've done over the last 5 years. And I also feel like a lot of that is astrological timing. I talk so much about how much we underestimate astrology and how much that can tell you about your life, and especially about when things happen. If you haven't listened to the episode on manifestation versus astrology and how astrology trumps manifestation, because your manifestations are what you're calling in, and the astrology defines, or the astrology is really what controls when those manifestations happen. So go listen to that if you haven't yet. But that to say, my astrology is really what lined up with when those lessons fully landed and when things started to actually shift in my life. And I'm not even there yet. Things are still shifting. I'm like literally coming up on one of the biggest like pivots in my life. Maybe not everybody, it depends on if you've done the work, but many, many people are. I've talked a lot about the end of 2025, 2026, 2027. Many of us are kind of hitting that peak climax, like switch moment where a lot of things will change. And if you've done the healing, if you've done the inner work, like I'm discussing, that's when you get the abundance. That's when you get the new relationships. That's when you get the opportunities. And it's not that it will be too late, later, but the energy will support that now if you are matching the frequency. Okay, but why does it feel so bad when you are healing? Like, what is actually happening during that healing that makes you feel so lost and so disconnected? Okay, part of it is just that healing is hard, right? Just plain and simple, we know that. But also there's all of these other intricate things that fall into that. Like you have old coping mechanisms, right? You have old patterns that you're used to operating out of. And when you start healing that, your body, your nervous system, your mind goes, wait, what are we doing? This is not our pattern. This is not, it's kind of like the devil, it's feeling safe even in your negative patterns because that's what you're used to. Your brain, your nervous system, your body is like, we know how to do this. Even if it's not healthy, this is what we're used to. The new way, the healthier way, we're not used to that. What are you doing? Are we in danger? Like what? This is unfamiliar territory. And we talk about that a lot, how your nervous system doesn't like unfamiliar territory, even though it's good for it. Like a parent, like, I know you don't like this, but I know this is what's best for you. It's kind of the same thing when you're retraining your nervous system. Your nervous system doesn't like it at first, but you know it's better. So you kind of have to push through that discomfort. So again, old coping mechanisms stop working, but the new ones aren't automatic yet. So it's like when you're changing a habit, you have to constantly remind yourself to change that habit. It's not just automatic yet. Your brain doesn't just do it on autopilot. It's like when you drive to work or you drive to school every single day, you can turn your brain off. You know how to get there. You do the same route every day. It's no big deal. Say you start taking a different route, or say you get a new job or go to a new school or you buy a new house and you're taking a different route home. If you're not consciously aware or consciously choosing to kind of keep your brain on while you're taking that new route, your brain is just going to like default to the other one. Have you ever done that where you accidentally drove to the wrong place because your brain was on autopilot? It's the same thing. Old coping mechanisms are still wired into your brain. The automatic ones aren't there yet. You have to consciously keep choosing it. You have to consciously keep trying to make the better choice, the more aligned, the healthier choice. You have to constantly choose to set the boundaries. You have to constantly choose to not stay in a negative mindset, whether it's a scarcity mindset, whether it's a victim mindset, maybe it's a low self-worth mindset. It takes actively making that choice over and over and over and over again. And none of us do it perfectly. So you don't have to feel like I have to do this perfectly every time or it's not going to work. It will. But again, the work always works if you do it long enough. The work always works. But the problem is many of us just give up. This is like, we do this in our jobs. We do this with all sorts of categories. We always give up before something is actually able to actually be birthed into the 3D world. Okay, so when you're in this messy middle, when you're in the healing phase, it creates this temporary emotional instability that makes people doubt themselves. Like, right? It makes you think, what am I doing wrong? Why does this feel so bad? You're not doing anything wrong. This is actually a sign of growth. The change is hard. That transition is hard. One reason for that is because healing forces you to stop running from your feelings, especially if you're someone who avoids deep feelings. And this often comes from childhood trauma, right? I'm somebody that has always, for better or for worse, really deep dived into my feelings. I just feel it all. I don't even know how to run from my emotions. I don't know how to shove stuff down. I just like vomit out all my emotions. I process it. I get it out. That's just a natural thing for me. Again, for better, for worse. But there's a lot of people, especially if you kind of learned that you had to bury your emotions in childhood, say you just had parents that, just didn't allow you to cry or didn't allow you to express your own thoughts and opinions. You learned as a child, it's not safe to verbalize. It's not safe to feel deep feelings. Okay. You grow up and it doesn't have to be that. Maybe you're more just naturally prone to that. Maybe this is just part of your personality. It can come from different places. But if you feel like someone who's constantly burying your emotions or you just avoid feeling a certain way, you're like, I don't want to feel that way, so I'm not going to look at that. If you start healing, you have to start looking at that. You have to start feeling your feelings. This is like when people go to therapy and all of a sudden they're talking to their therapist and they have to actually talk about the old stuff that hurt them. They have to actually go back and visit the negative experiences that they haven't wanted to visit or that they haven't even thought of maybe, and how it's affecting their current life. But then all of a sudden you have to go back and visit these old things, and there's a lot of crying and a lot of processing, and it's really hard, and we get really down on ourselves when we have to revisit this stuff. So it's uncomfortable and people can avoid it. However, you cannot heal unless you face that stuff head first, okay? But when you do it and when you get into the mess and you dive deep into the muck, temporarily you feel really sensitive, you feel really raw, and it doesn't feel good. And so a lot of people are like, this isn't doing anything. All I'm doing is like torturing myself. No, that's not true. Doing that work is actively moving you to a higher frequency, but you feel really sensitive while it's happening. Your body is learning to feel safety again, but it can't feel safe when it's still hanging on to all this internalized danger. Does that make sense? The process is messy. It's non-linear. It's unpredictable, right? It's kind of like this tornado of feelings and emotions and confusion while you're in it. And it could be that you're in it for years, or it could be that you're in it, on and off for months or years or whatever. But on the other side, again, that's where the opportunities are. It's like, how bad do you want it? How bad do you not only want to feel more fulfilled, feel happier, feel more grateful internally, because that affects your whole life, right? You're walking around either feeling depressed and anxious and traumatized and, just with all of this unprocessed emotion, or you can walk around feeling lighter and feeling healed and feeling happy and having a stronger sense of self-worth and not feeling like you're in scarcity, feeling like, the world, the life in front of you is full of opportunity instead of full of negative experiences. But in order to do that, your body has to feel safe. Your nervous system has to feel safe. And temporarily, it's not going to feel safe while you're doing the work because, again, your nervous system, your body is like, what are we doing? This is unstable. This is different. Okay, so you're not going to feel safe yet, but you have to keep going. But when you first stop numbing, when you first stop avoiding all of those emotions, the confusion comes up, right? It's very confusing. You're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all this feeling. I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. And so many people feel like they are regressing into a past place. They're like, oh, I feel like I'm back at square one. I feel like I'm back in my childhood. I feel like I'm back, in this part of my life. I'm just feeling this all over again. So it can feel like regression. It's not regression. You're going back and you're healing the stuff you didn't heal at the time. You are untangling old belief systems. You are fixing old patterns. You are changing the old version of you that other people are used to and that other people relied on. Whoa. You are healing the old version of you that other people are used to, that other people relied on, right? And so when you change and when you shift, other people in your life might be like, what are you doing? This isn't who you usually are. This isn't what you normally do or how you normally respond to me. Normally you're the strong one, or normally you're the peacekeeper, or normally you're the people pleaser or the self-sacrificer. And so when you stop those old coping mechanisms and those old patterns, it's very common for people around you to go, wait, what? And they might get frustrated with you, or they might be angry with you because they don't understand. They don't recognize that what you're doing is actually healthier for you and for them, because they don't need to be codependent on you, and you need to raise your self-worth, and you need to, value your own mental and emotional health. And so when that old version of you starts dissolving, it can disrupt other people's emotions towards you and how they perceive you. But that is part of the process. And you have to be able to be ready to take that, especially if you're a people pleaser and you're someone who really has a pattern of feeling like you need to make other people happy. This is a point in your life where you will have to be like, it's okay if someone else isn't happy with me because I'm doing what's right for me. It's okay if I say no to this thing. It's okay if I hold the boundary. It's okay if I turn them down or whatever it is. That's okay. It's not only okay, but it's necessary. And you have to train yourself to feel okay with that. Okay, so let's talk about like some symptoms of being in the messy middle. Like, how do you know? What are some kind of symptoms that you can look at to tell you like, okay, I am on the right trajectory, even though this is hard, even though it's messy and confusing and triggering, I am on the right path. I just have to keep going. Okay. It might look like one day you feel hopeful and the next day you question everything and you feel completely, confused about where you're going and what's next for you. All right. And then the next day you feel hopeful again. Like, that's very common. I have felt a lot of that recently. This is literally your emotional body detaching from old patterns. It's the confusion popping up where your nervous system again goes, I don't know what's happening. One day I feel good and the next day I'm like, wait. I don't recognize this new pattern we're doing. How do I know this will get me to where I need to go? keep going, keep making the aligned choices. Eventually, you will wire in that new neuro pathway and your body will get used to it and it won't feel so hard. Every time you do it, just like any pattern or routine, it will feel a little bit easier and a little bit easier. If you just started going to the gym, the first day it's really hard. The second day it's really hard. But maybe like a few weeks in, a few months in, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I just do this automatically without even thinking because it's just part of my routine. You also might feel physical tiredness. This is a big one because you're using up energy. You're using up mental energy. You're possibly using up physical energy. You're using up literally spiritual energy, your life force, because it does take effort to make change. Again, it's like, analogy queen, giving you another analogy. It's kind of like if you had to, this is like random and not really realistic, but like a train that's shifting tracks, except instead of the train doing it automatically, it's like you're pulling the train from, curving left on that track to curving right on this track. Like you are having to do all the effort of moving from one trajectory to another trajectory. And that takes a lot of strength and a lot of work. And you're going to be physically exhausted, which is why a lot of people give up because they're like, this is so tiring. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to feel this way anymore. It's hard. It's messy. I'm tired of crying. I'm tired of feeling this way. Trust me. I get that more than anyone. The amount of times I have just been in that place of like, I cannot bear another day of this. I feel like that's been most of my 2025. Okay, but that is a sign that A, you're doing something different, or B, you need to change something. So it could be because you're in the middle of, say, setting boundaries or working on your self-worth and it's uncomfortable and that's the hard work. Or it could be like you're starting to hit a wall, like your alignment, your frequency is rising and then it hits a wall. Like for example, when I was in my toxic marriage, it was like I was dealing and I was learning and I was growing, but there came a point where it was like I had done all this internal work and my partner hadn't. And so it's like I had done a lot of stuff that, helped protect me, but I was still in this really negative environment. So I couldn't fully heal while I was still there. And so for me, I hit a breaking point where I was finally like, I'm done. I've hit the point. I'm leaving. There's no turning back. There's no changing my mind. I'm leaving. And the day that I left, I felt so uplifted and free. Like for the first couple of weeks that I was just out of that house, I was like, this is amazing. I feel so happy. I feel so free. I feel like all this opportunity is just opening up for me, and then things kind of settled down and I kind of hit a grind and now it's like I'm working on moving to the next level of my life. But for me, like again, it could be that you're in the work and that's why it feels hard. It can also be that maybe you've done some work and now you need to make a change. Now you need to get over this speed bump so you can get to the next level. And that's why you feel that way. So you can kind of take a look at what's going on in your life and think, is this hard because I'm just in the middle of doing the work right now? Or is it hard because I've hit a ceiling and now I need to make a new change? Okay. It could also look like pulling away from people. Like all of a sudden this relationship doesn't feel good anymore, right? Like my marriage, maybe it's a friendship, maybe it's a parent, who knows? This doesn't feel good anymore. I feel like I'm done being in this relationship this way, whether I just need to create distance or whether I need to break this relationship off entirely. I can't sit in it anymore. That's a big sign that you are shifting, that you're healing, you're in the messy middle. And you might not even know why. Like maybe it could be obvious. Like I know this relationship is unhealthy because XYZ. Or maybe it's just like, I don't really know what the problem is, but I don't feel good around this person anymore. Every time I'm around this person, my energy feels drained. I don't feel good. It just doesn't feel like it fits anymore. Again, you don't have to know the reason, but that's also a sign that this relationship is no longer aligned with the frequency that you're at. Speaking of, because we do talk about this in the membership, I just want to remind you that we do a membership meeting every single month where you meet with me online and if you don't want to show up live, you don't have to. I will record the session and send it to you. But we do a monthly meeting where it's just me and you guys talking about this stuff, where you can ask direct questions, we can bounce ideas off of each other, and it's just a really great place where it's like the healing becomes really practical. Like all of a sudden, we're not just, learning about it, we're talking about it, and we're implementing a game plan for, this is what's happening in my life. Now what do I do? Like, what do you think needs to happen here? So it's essentially the second tier of the Patreon. Patreon, you get the Patreon, you get an extra episode every single week. The membership is just the second tier of that, where you not only get the extra episode every week, but you also get to meet with me in a group setting. You get the recording, and then there's also like a group psychic reading and things like that. Oh, and if you're a patron, a part of the Patreon, you also get a discount on the course, Spiritual to Psychic. So just something to keep in mind. I really, really enjoy those meetings. So that is linked in the show notes if you want to check that out. But coming back to this topic, you cannot manifest new relationships, new opportunities, new timelines while your body is still wired for survival and while you're still holding old baggage, old trauma, old blocks in your body. I also talk about that a lot in the course, where we talk about like unblocking. You have your chakras, right? And there's energy that flows up and down throughout your chakras. Well, anytime there's a block, it's like that energy, it's like a stream or a river that kind of hits, a bunch of rocks, and there's a bunch of stones and rocks in the flow of the water, and it just slows it down. It's not that the energy completely stops, but it slows it down. It becomes really stagnant. And so you cannot fully have access to the energy, especially if it's like in certain chakras. Anyway, we talk about that deeper in the course. But basically this internal shift, this internal uncomfortableness, this internal work will always predate the external shift, even if you can't see it yet. So it's like, what is this? Like analogy number 10. It's like a seed under the soil, right? I use this analogy a lot, but it's like you cannot see it, even though the seed has germinated, it's sprouted, it's broken through the shell of the seed, but it's still under the soil. You can't see it yet, but it doesn't mean it's not working. It doesn't mean things aren't shifting. It just means it hasn't manifested into the 3D yet. But the work always works if you keep going. You are breaking cycles. You are actively changing the trajectory of your life. And not only that, the trajectory of the people around you, because when you heal that frequency, you tend to bring other people into your orbit, and they can choose whether or not they want to be a part of that, which is why a lot of times either those relationships come with you or they don't. But you have an effect on the people around you, especially if you have children. Like, this passes down. The higher your frequency is, the more aligned you are, the more you can teach that to your children, even subconsciously. Energy radiates out from you. We all have these auric fields that intermingle with other people's auric fields, okay? Your energy affects those around you, and their energy affects you. But the positive energy is stronger than the negative energy. So your higher frequency is more powerful than their negative frequency. Theirs can still affect you, but you have more power and more authority when you are in that higher frequency. And also, I want to remind you, and I want to drill this home. That's not the phrase, whatever the phrase is. Remember that other people will not always reciprocate your higher frequency decisions. So it's like, just because you start acting out of a more mature place, a place of more emotional intelligence, a place of being more healed, other people have the opportunity to reflect that back to you. But if they choose not to, that's on them. Not only are you not responsible for it, but just keep in mind that it's common for people to not match that, back to you. So don't feel like, wait, I'm changing. Why aren't they responding differently to me? Because it's uncomfortable, because they see that maybe they're no longer getting what they're used to getting from you, and they may choose to let that affect them in an angry or negative way. Okay, so I just want to give you that reminder, because I feel like this is one of the areas where people really struggle, because it involves other people, and other people have the free will to respond in different ways, etc. Okay, so just kind of to wrap this topic up, the main thing that is like the take-home moment that I want you to remember, other than how to do the work and what that looks like, is that when you are doing the work and it looks like nothing is happening, actually, your whole world is being shifted. Your timelines are being changed underneath the surface, behind the scenes. Things are happening, but it takes time. The physical always lags behind the energetic. So the energy is always step 1. The physical comes at step 2, and it doesn't always come immediately. It depends on how long it takes you to do that healing. It depends on what the manifestation is. It depends on other people. It depends on all this stuff, but it's not going to take your entire life. Okay, unless you take your entire life to heal those things. But it's not going to take years and years and years and years But it does take time. But if you are doing the healing, if you are sowing the seeds, your time is coming. The work always works. Okay? It's a marathon, not a sprint. So I feel like some of you may have needed to hear that because I'm in that space and I need to remind myself of those things almost every single day. But I hope that this episode was helpful for you. I'm so thankful for you guys. I'm excited that I've hit a year of podcasting and I hope to have many more years to come. Thank you for being here. If you have not left a review on the podcast, please do that. It makes a big difference. It really, really helps get the podcast out to new eyes and more people. If you have listened to at least 2 episodes of Dare Me to Prosper and have enjoyed them, please leave Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I love you forever. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye.